Good morning and welcome to a return to society. Carla, if you could put the slides up, please, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So this morning, we're just going to kind of look at what sorts of things happen to people and what barriers have they got to overcome when returning to society and being released from custody. I'm sure a lot of you will have your own stories, your own experiences, and with the question and answers, if anybody wants to share any of those at the end, that'd be fantastic. I'm going to go off my own experience, and I'm going to go off the experience of other people that I've spoken to. But the whole point of this really is to just kind of raise awareness of the sorts of things people are trying to deal with at the same time as returning to society, returning to their families, and hopefully at some point trying to return or start employment. So next slide, Carla, please. For those of you who've been with us before, what I try and do is iron out the things that we're going to discuss, iron out the aims and objectives, and then ask you guys to engage and commit to a change of practice based on anything that you've heard. It only needs to be something simple. It might be, something that just jogs your memory of something previously. It might be some good practice that's been shared by somebody else, or it might just be to, be a little bit more aware of the sorts of things people are going through. So the aims and objectives of today are for us to understand the barriers faced by people being released from custody, to identify how we can help and support. And I'm not expecting us, to be jacks of all trades. There are people and places that we can signpost people to. And then if we can commit to something that we've learned from this morning to put into our practice and reflect on how that goes over the next 7 days, then that would be fantastic. Next slide, Carla, please. So returning to society, and again, it's different for everybody. Everybody's journey, everybody's path, everybody's sentence is different. And returning to society is often something that people long for, but is often something that people feel very apprehensive about as well. When you're in custody, you've got to deal with yourself. You've got to deal with the day-to-days of being in custody. A lot of the time, you don't plan too far ahead. You are encouraged to, and there's education programs and things like that. But returning to society for some people is as much apprehensive as it is exciting. And it's that fear of the unknown. What are you going to do? Where are you going to live in some instances? How are you going to support yourself? What help's out there? And how are you going to cope, again, dependent upon the length of the sentence, with living in society? There's going to be many changes that have happened dependent upon the length of your sentence. And your children might be a little bit older, your parents might be a little bit older, things will have changed, the landscape may have changed. So for a lot of people, there's a lot of apprehension there. Next slide, Carla, please. And these are just some of the barriers that people face that you'll be fully aware of on release. Housing and accommodation is a big one. In some instances, people they don't know where they're going until the day of release. Where they are going might be somewhere that they're not particularly comfortable with. It might be that they've had previous addictions in the past and they're aware or concerned that they'll be around people that are using drugs or using alcohol. So there's lots of things that, in order for people to get their lives back on track, there's lots of barriers and hurdles that they kind of need to get over. Where are they going to get the money from? Are they looking for employment? Who's going to employ somebody with a criminal record? What's their relationship like with family and friends? Do they, are the family prepared to take them back in? Have they got to build relationships with former partners, with their children? When was the last time they saw some of these people? There's lots of things that, on release can really cause anxiety and stress. And in some instances, things like that may already be sorted, which means that they're further along their journey to reduce reoffending, to find meaningful employment. But for those that have all these apprehensions and have nowhere to live and have got bridges to build with family, or may not even have any family, And I think, the whole point of this morning is to just kind of remind us that, to be conscious of the sorts of things that people have or have dealt with in chaotic lives. And you guys will be, fully aware of this in the same way that I am. There'll be people who, it's a real struggle for them to come out into society and start again. For others, their mindset may be completely different. They'll be able to put a mistake behind them. They may still have family. They may still have a home to go to. So it's just being aware of the different levels and the different barriers that people have to face. Again, going through the list a little bit more, the ID and banking, that's something that's operated now on a 12-week pre-release in most prisons. The one that kind of stands out to me is debt. So if you're sentenced to a period of time in custody, your debts, unless you've got somebody to manage those on the outside, will kind of just stack up and pile up. And I know there are companies out there now, providing advice. You've got your Citizens Advice Bureau. There's a company that operate in London and operate in the Midlands now called My Bank, where they can kind of, guide people and advise people on how to deal with debt. So it's just kind of us being aware of the sorts of things that are going to make life difficult, the sorts of things that, may mean that there are little bumps in the road, that things may not go particularly smoothly. And as I'm sure you're aware, license conditions as well, which obviously need to be followed, but can make things difficult in that return to employment or return to family. So it's just to be aware of those things more than anything, and look at how that affects a person's behaviour, how that affects a person's mood and mindset. As I've said repeatedly, the job that you guys do is a fantastic job, and it's a difficult job. And helping and supporting people who have got numerous issues in a previously or still chaotic life is a difficult thing to navigate through. But if we're aware of the sorts of things that they're going through, if we're conscious of the struggles that they're having, it may allow us to be a little bit more empathetic. It may allow us to offer more support. And if we know where that support's needed, it's easier to signpost in terms of where to go. If you're unaware of somebody's problems or thoughts or the issues that they're having, it's difficult to signpost and guide somebody. So I think it all goes back to that kind of relationship between probation practitioners and people on probation. And that relationship is so key. If there is clear communication, if there is trust, if there is transparency, if there's honesty, then, you are the people that can start to help them find a new way, a new road, a new path. But us being aware of the sorts of things that are going to block that will certainly help us move people forward. Next slide, Carla, please. So for some people, a new start, it's a great opportunity to focus on the now, focus on the future, to learn lessons from, what's previously gone wrong. But for some people, as we've already kind of discussed, it's where am I going to live? How am I going to eat? Where am I going to get any money from? Who's going to give me a job? I've got no family. I've got no friends. Who's going to help me? Who's going to support me? And I hear some fantastic stories of, people who've been on probation who are now working. They're living a good life, a comfortable life. And a lot of those credit the probation practitioners that they've worked with as the reason for change or giving them that support that they need. And I think it's really important to recognise that in some instances, people don't have the support networks that, I was privileged enough to have, that you guys may be privileged enough to have. And for some people, that stable, that professional, that honest interaction that they have comes from you guys. And in some instances, that will be the most stable factor within their life. So the support that they get from you in overcoming these barriers and creating that relationship is really key. Next slide, Carla, please. Obviously, in terms of the main aim is to reduce reoffending and prevent people going back down that path and back down a road that's led them to where they were. So in order to do that, one of the best factors in reducing reoffending is employment. But for some people, they may not have been employed before. It may be a long time since they were previously employed. They may not understand the differences in the labour market of what's needed now. The experience that they had may be a little bit out of date. They might need further training. So again, in terms of education, in terms of companies that can help people produce a CV, produce a disclosure letter, point people towards new and exciting opportunities, I think they're equally as important as well. And I know there are a number of companies out there doing it, and it will differ for different areas. There's a company in the Midlands called Inside Job that specifically work with those that have served a sentence in supporting them to gain employment or become or return to employment, or in some cases just start employment. So I think that whole reducing reoffending, it's important that we know where to signpost people. And you'll have companies that you work with, you'll have third sector, you'll have people within the probation office. And I think it's finding from the relationship that you have with the person on probation, it's finding out what their interests are, what it is that they want to do, how they're going to get there. And another really important point, I think, is being realistic. There's nothing wrong with, having an end goal, having a dream, but we've got to realise where we are now and kind of look at the steps that we need to take in order to get to that end point. And I think that career planning, that advice, speaking from a professional person in terms of what they've had to do and how they've done things, it is really key and important, and we can learn from other people's experiences. Likewise, we at St Giles Wise have something called experiential advisors that some of you will be aware of. Those experiential advisors are now, they've served sentences or community sentences. They're now working within the third sector, and they are fantastic role models for people that want to go into the same type of work, that want to help and support people, that want to use their experience to prevent others going down that path, or in some instances just act as a little bit of hope. Because when you're in custody and when you're just released, your head's all over the place. You're thinking, who's going to give me a job? What am I going to do? What transferable skills do I have? Who's going to take that opportunity? But when you see people who have been in the same boat, who've walked in the same shoes and have now turned things around, that gives you a lot of hope. And speaking to them and using them, and you're all able to use our experiential advisors. If you contact your relationship manager for your area, whatever area that you're in, they will have access to the experiential advisors, and they've got some great knowledge, some great experience, and they've done some fantastic things. So if that's something that you'd like it using at a local area, at a PDU level, then please obviously get in touch, because those stories are inspirational, and they can really help and support with moving people forward. Next slide, Carla, please. So again, it's kind of who can help, and you guys will probably know more than me in relation to this, in terms of where you can signpost people to and the sorts of help that's available for people. And I know that people are busy. I understand that there are staffing issues. I understand that there are time constraints. But that relationship that you create with the person on probation, that level of trust, that engagement, that support, will help them move forward. Use your relationship managers, use the experiential advisors, point people towards pop talks, point people towards other agencies and companies that are out there to support. That there are lots of charities that do lots and lots of fantastic work, and maybe have a little look in your area, what's around, where you can point people to. what's worked well. If you're speaking to people all the time as you do, you know, what's worked well for them, what have they found? And it's just about being aware and sharing information, sharing good practice between us, using the experiences of others. I suppose with all these talks, it's kind of reminding people why they got into the role in the first place. It's reminding people of the barriers and how difficult it is for people leaving custody. It's reminding them of what a fantastic job they do and the support that they offer. It's about collaborating with other people. And, you know, it's a difficult task. You can't be expected to do everything, but you can signpost to other areas and departments. It's about using each other as well. You know, it's of no doubt that it's a very stressful job. It can be very rewarding, yet very frustrating. But what's going on in different areas? What are people doing that's really working? What are people doing that's not working? We used to do an activity in education called KISS. So we would look at all of our practices and we would look at what we would need to keep doing. So what's worked really well? What do we need to keep doing? The I then stood for what are we doing, but do we need to improve? So what is it that we've kind of, it's a great idea, but it just needs to, you know, be improved in some way. The S then is what do we need to start doing? So what is it that we're not quite doing at the moment? What needs to begin? And the final S on KISS was what do we need to stop doing? And I think being able to reflect as a group and look at the things that you are doing that work well, that what needs improving, what needs to start happening a bit more, and what needs to stop is a good way of looking at, you know, how you're working with people and how you're moving forward. Next slide, Carla, please. So again, if you can, pop in the chat anything that you've taken from today that you will use in the future, anything that's just given you a little reminder. I've spent 20 years in education, and there were times when the situation and the longevity of it had kind of got in the way of the thoughts and feelings and processes and reasons why I'd got into it in the first place. And sometimes just going back to basics is one of those things that we can just kind of reset with. Oh, I used to do that a couple of years ago. I'll start doing that again. So if you can just pop into the chat anything that's been useful, anything that you're going to commit to in terms of change. We've got one more talk in series 3, and we will start a series 4 of these pop talks in January. It'll probably be late January, and we'll get all the dates out to you as soon as we possibly can.